Speaker. I loved your closing comment about your job as a philosopher is to give us courage. That is a wonderful thing for us all to take away, but I think it's also a great way for me to introduce our next speaker, Jeff Benson. How many years have you been fighting for the carbon pricing? At least 3, 4?
Yeah.
And she, despite the doubters, despite the opponents, despite all, she's still there with persistence and passion, and she is succeeding. We were chatting before, and she gave me 2 examples of the way she's succeeding. First of all, this year her bill continues to get more and more co-sponsors, more than it has in the past. And another sign of success is the fact that the other political party is mounting an opponent in the next election to try to get her defeated. They are in fear. They are running scared. If we have the courage to help Jennifer, as we have been for these years, and if we all get behind her, we can get this done in this legislative session. So I'm so looking forward to hearing more about the plan to get from here to there. Representative Benson.
Well, thank you. I'm very, very happy to be here, and this is a career first. I have never spoken after a philosopher, nor have I ever heard a political scientist talk the way you did. But I am really happy to be here, and I have dedicated a lot of time to traveling around Massachusetts and beyond to talk about not only this bill, but our climate crisis. I was lucky enough to participate in the UN climate talks in 2017 in Bonn, Germany, which I found to be very exciting, rewarding, and energizing, if we can use that pun. And but I've also been working with colleagues from other states and trying to really talk about what's the best way we can work together to deal with this issue, because you know, we can do what we each can do, right? And we should. I recently transitioned to a plant-based diet. I'm now vegan. And my staff loves this. Sean is here with me, who has helped me research where I can get lunch in the city of Boston now. You know, that is one small step, and each of us can make a step. But if we can work together, and as states, if we can work with other states, we can certainly do more and magnify that effort. So the bill that we will be talking about tonight is also being used as a template in 17 other states. So that's pretty exciting. And so we have the bi-coastal states are working on this, and even some of the ones in the middle. So hopefully we can really get a movement going across the country, and maybe put some pressure on those in Washington who have been not listening. So I will get into it, and I hate PowerPoint, so I'm going to go through this very quickly, but I think it's more important to answer questions, because those kinds of conversations I think are far more valuable than me giving you an outline of a bill. But let's do it. What is carbon pricing? So you already know this, I know you do. And I knew what this was, sort of. And I got to go to take a class a few years ago at a very nice, prestigious institution where I got to listen to someone who worked in the Obama administration, Cass Sunstein, who was an economist, and talked a lot about the Obama administration's sort of take on putting a price on carbon, and why that was important, and what it means to internalize an externality. And so I thought, this is really smart, we should be doing this in Massachusetts, so we wrote a bill. So carbon, it's fun when you get to do that. Yeah. So what carbon pricing it addresses climate change by putting a price on the costs of carbon. So meaning the public health, environmental costs of carbon. So what we say, we know these are the external impacts. We want to make sure that we are taking into account the impacts on climate change, air and water pollution, public health, which is a huge, huge issue. I'm also chairing the Joint Committee on Healthcare Financing, interestingly, this session, and so I get to talk about this on two levels. It disincentivizes fossil fuel use by raising that cost, and incentivizes the adoption of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and others, and we can talk about that. So it's a carrot and stick approach. We already do this here. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative was passed in 2008 and put a cap and trade system on our electrical sector. So it has done a great job. And so this is not a foreign idea, but putting a carbon price that is public and transparent is a new idea here in Massachusetts. So carbon pricing's been around for a long time. Finland, the EU, and RGGI, like I said. So it's a global effort, and I got to talk to people all over the world in 2017 when I was in Germany for the UN climate talks, and it's amazing when you see the president of Mexico stand up and say, we believe in climate change and we should be putting a price on carbon, and you hear nothing from the United States. You know, so it's a little alarming. Great. All right. So the data shows that carbon pricing has a substantial benefit to our planet, health, and the economy, and we're going to get into that a little bit. Denmark, very successful, cut emissions by more than a third. The U.S. has cut emissions from in our RGGI states by about 50%, and that's pretty cool. Which is why the bill does not include the electrical portion in the bill, because it's already covered by RGGI. And this is the one that was really a recent effort. Harvard University study estimates that a carbon fee in Massachusetts, just in Massachusetts, this is the first study commissioned just for the Commonwealth, would save not only hundreds of lives, although that's very important, but $2.9 billion in healthcare costs by 2040. So the job I'm doing right now in the legislature is I'm writing a healthcare reform bill to bring down the cost of healthcare. And one of the things I do when I go out to groups and I talk about healthcare is I say, you know, the greatest way to bring down healthcare costs is to make people healthier. You know, right? Right? Yeah. So you don't have to be a Harvard professor to figure that out. And one of the ways we can keep people healthier is by making our earth cleaner. And so, you know, these kinds of things, they go hand in hand. So what does this bill do? Well, this bill, 2810, this session, that's the number. It is different from the bill I initially filed last session. We improved it, and you can get into that. So it initially puts a fee of $20 per ton on carbon emission, raises it to 40 over 4 years. And then it goes up, we can talk about that too, automatically. Because I don't necessarily trust my colleagues to take that vote. And we can talk about that. 70% of all those funds coming in go back to you. And so that is your incentive. You're welcome. And we make sure, and this is some of the improvements that we did over the first bill, we make sure that that is weighted for low and moderate income people. Why is that? Because if we are really, and then, well, I'll say first, 30% of the rest of the funds go into the Green Infrastructure Fund, which will go out to cities and towns and will also be weighted by income for that community. So why do we do that? And I just want to take a quick break and say that that was one of the things I really wanted to do that hadn't really been addressed by the legislature or any of the bills I saw, was that if we are gonna make a change in the trajectory we're on now in climate, we can't only be addressing emissions in Newton or Wellesley or Acton. We have to be addressing it everywhere. And that means in rental housing, that means in inner cities, that means every place. And so much of the incentives that we have put in place to do those things are not being accessed by people who do not own a home, who do not have money, who are in communities of color, who are in inner cities where you can't put a solar array on a rooftop. And so we have to be able to address everybody. And so that was one of the guiding forces behind this bill, and what we worked probably the hardest on is how do we do that? And we want to make sure that we're touching everybody. So, rebates, 70% of fees go back to consumers and employers, and that is intentional. And you get a rebate per employee if you're a business owner. And we make sure we weight those for the low and moderate income folks. So if you're in the bottom 40% of income earners in Massachusetts, our models show you will make money off of this. So that will actually put money in your pocket. So we can talk about why that's valuable for us. Rural residents receive a little bit higher rebate because we know there's not a lot of options there for transportation, right? And so I live in a rural community, I know this. If I want to go to the supermarket, I have to drive. I have no other way of going. And it's several miles. So we want to make sure that we're not unfairly disadvantaging populations. We are making sure that not only are people, low-income folks, being protected from a rebate perspective, but we're also putting more money into heating assistance for folks. We don't want anyone to go cold. And so, we are really trying to make sure we're protecting people as much as possible as we're making this change. Employers. So based on the number of employees, most businesses would come out even. And so, but what it does do is it gives them a reason to look at efficiency programs, at renewable energy, and it gives them a check to be able to invest in those. And so, we're really hoping that a lot of those small and mid-sized businesses will take advantage of this. So, highly impact industries like local government would get a bit higher rebate. We want to make sure that the taxpayer isn't paying twice. And so those local municipal governments, we're going to make sure that they're being covered too. We have this is new this session, a rapid response set aside. It's to make sure that dislocated workers are being protected. And so one of the things we heard was from labor, that they were really concerned that with this changing economy, it's going to really leave some folks out of that new changing economy. We want to make sure that we're bringing them along too. And consumers, employers can spend their rebate on anything, but when they get their rebate, we're going to give them some education. Here's some ways that you can spend your rebate to help you bring down your carbon footprint. So that might be a smart thermostat, it might be new tires for your car, it might be whatever it may be, but we're going to give them some ideas. So 30% of the money goes into a green infrastructure fund. And that fund would be spent on green infrastructure. Big shocker there. And in the first year alone, it's about $300 million. That's a lot of money, because we don't have a revenue source right now in the state for just this. We're trying to claw it out of everything else we're doing. This would be a dedicated revenue source just for this purpose. In the fourth year, we would be doubling that, obviously. $600 million. That's a lot of money. Low and moderate income communities would receive at least 40% of those funds. And so that's that protection we talked about earlier. We have goals. We have goals in Massachusetts, as you already heard that. So, 2008, we created the Global Warming Solutions Act. That's actually the year before I came into the legislature. And we're on track for 2020. 2050, we are targeted 80% reduction. There is a bill, as was mentioned. I'm a co-sponsor of that bill to make that net zero by 2050. But we're not going to meet even the 80% reduction by 2050 unless we do something dramatically different now. So a revenue positive carbon price that puts its own source of revenue into just these projects is a way to get to that net zero. And so, you know, we believe, and many organizations, the coalition supporting this legislation believes that without this, we won't make it in 2050. So what can you do? You know, you're doing it, you're here, right? Work within these organizations, there are many, to advocate for these issues. It is not a slam dunk, I will tell you. Yes, we have more co-sponsors. We're up to 105 co-sponsors, which is great, which is more than half of the House. But it still hasn't had a hearing. And it's getting late. So we need a hearing on this bill. And we need a lot of people to voice support of this bill. And we have finally caught the ire of the opposition. And so there has been a huge push to fight against this legislation. And they're calling it a takeover by government, trying to take your money, and I'm a horrible person. They are mailing my district, the Massachusetts GOP and Mass Fiscal Alliance have been writing op-eds in opposition to this legislation. And it's amazing, but they are misrepresenting how much money this would cost a normal family. It's shocking. But, so I'm hoping that everyone in this room, if you are willing to write a letter to the editor, talk to your neighbors, send an email to your representative who, I know for here, KCON is already a co-sponsor, she's on board. She's great. But send something to the members of the TUE committee, ask them for a hearing. We need to get this moving. So this is it for the bill itself, right? So I'm gonna answer questions. I wanna just dive in a little bit more to the weighting of those rebates, because it's something we worked really hard on. And so it's basically by quintile of income. And so, you get a higher rebate if you're in the first 20% and a slightly lower if you're in the next 20%. But 60% of people in Massachusetts would either make money or break even. That's pretty amazing, considering the impact this will have. So 60% of the people in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will either come out ahead or break even. So, when the GOP comes out and says it's going to cost your family $1,200 a year, that is not true. And unless, of course, you have, you drive a Hummer and you have a mansion.
And a quarter a year in income.
Right, so yeah, maybe for you it'll cost you some money, but I would argue, A, you can afford it, right? And B, you're certainly adding a heck of a lot more carbon emission than I am. So, go have that burger and that Hummer, but you're gonna pay for it, so, and I'm okay with that. So let's, I'm happy to take questions. you know, the price of a gallon of gas, for example, but it's not collected at that point of sale, it's collected at the wholesale when it enters the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
But how do you figure that in the case of things that are manufactured outside where the energy is used for the manufacture? Is that taken into
Well,
account
we
or not?
don't, so we're capturing actual fuel,
Okay, just
used and sold here in Massachusetts.
Thank
We are looking at, the whole life cycle of fuel. So right now, it's when it enters into Massachusetts, that's where this is assessed. But we also, in the bill, request to have within 9 months a life cycle projection of how we could actually get back to the fracking issue, for example. So, you know, we're doing what we can do, but we are also looking at how can we reach back and capture some of that as well.
Representative Benson, thank you for your courage and your leadership on this. I'm Fred Small with the Faith Science Alliance for Climate Leadership, and I see several steering committee members here as well. My question is about strategy. You know, a lot of us here are, dare I say, liberals. We come from liberal districts. We have liberal representatives. They may already be co-sponsors.
Yeah.
And some people say that, you know, Speaker DeLeo is it in the House. But there must be a way to carry this across the finish line. So how do we get there? I mean, even a hearing, I've been to lots of hearings of wonderful bills and they die,
Yep.
notwithstanding. So how do we influence DeLeo and how do we influence other people who have the power to move this through the
So,
House?
you know, thank you for asking that. So I do a lot of these, right? And I hear a lot of, you know, Speaker DeLeo is too conservative, or he's too this, or he's too that. Actually, he's a good friend of mine, and I wouldn't be in the position I am in if he didn't have faith in me, right? And he is, first and foremost, he sees his position as protecting the members of the House, right? The best way to influence the Speaker is to create a groundswell of public support. That is the way to change, I think, the dynamic that is happening right now in not just Massachusetts State House, but across the country. If people believe, and so I will use, for example, the gas tax. We voted to raise the gas tax and to index it to inflation. That was a big vote for a lot of people, and especially for those who are border community representatives, right? And Tom Golden, who is the chair of TUE, is one of them. He's in Lowell. He and many of our colleagues were directly targeted at the ballot box for that vote, and that was repealed by the voters. Right. That has left a stinging feeling for a lot of my colleagues. Why, you know, we tried to do the right thing, and yet the public repealed it. And so they need to see that there's public interest in doing this. Now, when I go around the state, I talk to a lot of people. People say to me, well, I'm much more likely to support something like this than simply a gas tax increase, right? So I'm gonna get some of that money back. I can see where it's going. I feel like it's making a difference, right? That's what we need to be able to explain to members of the House, members of the Senate, and the governor, quite frankly. And that's the other big story, is if the governor's gonna veto it, it's really hard to ask someone to put themselves on the line, like I have, now that my whole district has been papered and you know, I've been targeted. My colleagues look at me and they think, I don't want that. I don't want that, right? How can I ask my colleagues to put their neck out if the governor's gonna veto it anyway? So we need to work on the governor, and we need to work on the public saying, yes, we support this. And that can be anything from op-eds to door-to-door grassroots campaigning, but we need to show that there is interest out there for this.
Hi, three quick things. One is, I love the bill and all the nitpicking that went into every, man, that's tough, there's a lot of money, everyone wants their hands on it. My one nitpick is that I'd love to see the amount that goes back to the, like the low-income individuals. You know, okay, so let's say I'm due $500 cash this year from them. But I'll get $600 cash if I agree to buy windows and upgrade my heating system. I would love to see more of an incentive. You can have the money, but more if you spend it on you know, the insulation and so on. I'd also like a one-page of the points, the knitting of your bill, so I
Oh, sure, we
could
have
get
that.
reference
We
to.
can send that out.
And who the committee members are, so we can start working on it.
Thank you. I'm sure they'll be very happy with me when they get here.
You know my name.
I just wonder if there would be more support for people who are neutral or opposing this, if a larger percentage of the money that's collected is distributed back to taxpayers, or is that the?
Well, I think 70% is a lot.
Right.
You know, I know that others, Senator Barrett, for example, has 100% going back, and non-weighted, just rebates back. And the reason I did not want to do that is because you are banking on people just personally making choices to curb their behavior, right? And so we're trying to create a decision matrix for them that helps them make the right choices, but we're also going to put some real money behind big projects to make a difference, right? So if I'm only relying on people personally making a decision, then yeah, maybe I'm helping them a little bit by making one thing a little more expensive and making something else a little easier, but it's not a wholesale change from what's happening right now. And there are a lot of people who have the money who could make major changes or they're choosing not to. So we have to push that envelope a little harder.
I heard Naomi Klein speak last week right here in Newton, and she talked about yellow vests, and I'm just thinking that some of your points, one in particular, came from thinking about the yellow vest movement, and curious if that's so.
I'm not that familiar.
That's good.
So, yeah, but there was.
The one in particular was that rebates weighted towards those in
Okay.
rural areas who were driving.
Right,
That's where the initial yellow vest, the rational part of
okay.
it.
Oh, yeah, well, that started before any of that. That was my idea. Because I live in a rural community. But because I've been in the fights about the gas tax, for example. And the idea that that money is going into transportation projects inside of 128 or 95, I still can't get used to that. But, you know, and then communities like mine don't have, get nothing, right? And so it's really hard to build public support if people aren't gonna see a benefit. And we wanna make sure everyone has a benefit from this, or at least aren't unduly harmed by it. Yeah?
Now, I have a question, it's a little bit different, because I live in Malden, for instance, and Railroad Raider in Saugus, and I got an email from the Saugus River Watershed Council about a meeting Tuesday night. I couldn't go because I had another meeting, but it was about because Railroad Raider wanted to, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they wanted to basically pollute more and like buy credits, if you
Buy
will,
credits, right.
and pollute more,
Yep.
and then they would sell the credits, and so then, so that it would
So
be.
that's a cap and trade system.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so how does this address something like that? Because that community, which I'm a little bit away from, but basically, that community would be getting more pollution and then somewhere else would be cleaner, so
Yeah,
how
so
does
this
this
is a
problem get
credit-based
solved?
system. This is different. I mean, so what a cap and trade system does is it creates a marketplace. And so it says, here's the total number of credits we're going to allow, and then you get to buy and sell them in order to pollute more or make money, you know, as you move forward. And so that allows some places to pollute more. This doesn't do that. If you pollute more, you're paying more, period. You're gonna get the same rebate whether you pollute, you know, 5 times more than somebody else versus less than somebody else. You're gonna get the same rebate. So it does not benefit you to be a bigger polluter. Does that make sense? You look very confused.
Yeah,
So let's just say, we're going to divide all of the rebates for businesses by the number of businesses, okay? Everyone's gonna get $10 for every employee. So $10 for you, $10 for you, you all work for me, I'm getting $10 for each of you. But I am going to decide to do some horrible thing where I'm going to upgrade all of my fleet of trucks to huge, one-ton pickups instead of the F-150s I used to have, right? Now, I'm gonna be spending way more money on gas for that big fleet, right? They're shiny and pretty and they have chrome, right? But I'm still only getting $10 for each of you. So I might be spending, $500 more for the gas for these cars, but I'm not making any more money from the rebates. So why would I do that? That seems like a very poor business decision, right? So I can't say, I'm gonna buy rebates from some other company so that I can make up the difference. You can't. That's it. That's all you get. So you wanna spend your money in a stupid way, then that's your choice. But maybe it'd be smarter to keep the smaller trucks and capture more of those rebates and use it to say, supplement with some electric vehicles.
Wheelabrator presents a really interesting problem because they are a trash to energy operation. So that trash would not have the carbon tax on it. It would be the gas or whatever they're bringing in from out of state to burn it with.
Well, biomass is something that we're looking at, how do we quantify?
Okay.
So that would be a biomass plant. So right now, we have to look at the equivalents for that. That's in the bill.
Great.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, first of all, I like that explanation of the difference between cap and trade and the fee. That made it quite clear, at least to me. Question I have is, there are three major areas of emission sources: electricity, transportation, and buildings. And I can see for electricity how one could charge that. What you can tell how much is being generated and base it. Transportation, at least for the fuel part of it, you can do it on gasoline sales. And part of it for buildings could be how much is burned for fuel.
Yep.
But the other part of buildings are the buildings themselves
Sure.
that take energy to build and run apart from the fuel and so on.
Cement.
How does
We're
the
not
bill
capturing
pick up those costs?
Yeah, it doesn't. So we're really focused on fuel. We're focused on emissions of carbon emissions. We're not focused on, right now, on building practices other than how you heat them and what that generates. So, and for example, one of the other ideas out there is including, it's called TCI, you probably read about it in the paper, including the transportation sector into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a cap and trade system, which would say, we're gonna have gasoline sales as part of that, and diesel, cars in there. So that'll capture 40% of the emission market that we have right now. But it does nothing for buildings. And so, right now, other than zoning and other incentives we have in place for changing sort of building practices, we're focused on fuel.
Somewhat similar to the environment.
So if Massachusetts doesn't meet its existing emissions targets, can the fee on this
Oh,
higher
yeah,
than $40 a
I
ton?
teased that and I didn't go all, yeah. So that's the beauty, that's one of the changes I made this year. And part of it was based on this, vote of trying to raise the gas tax and it being repealed and people don't wanna take that vote anymore. So I'm gonna let my colleagues off the hook. once you get this in place, the future increases in that carbon price is going to be based on how close we are to meeting our goals. Because we've already voted on that. That was voted on in 2008. So we've already said this is our target. If we're not on target, then we need to be increasing that carbon price in order to get on target. Once we are on target, it'll freeze there, unless it needs to change again to meet those goals. So it will be influenced by our path to meet those goals.
Mass Interfaith Power and Light is like every other organization and has limited resources. Which districts should we be focusing our attention
Oh
on?
my. Oh golly. Well, I'm gonna tell you this. This is how I look at it, because I get a lot of emails from a lot of people, right? I weight the emails from my district far more than I do from KCON's district, no offense. So, what I would say is, reaching out to the people you know in other districts who can then reach out to their own reps is far more effective than everyone saying, I'm going to email the Speaker of the House. So that is far more effective. And then I think that clearly the audience is anyone who is not a co-sponsor of this bill. We have Republican supporters in the House. This is not a partisan, I mean, it's sort of partisan, but it's not only, it is a bipartisan effort. We do have supporters in the House who are Republicans, and so, I want to make sure they are supported too in coming out for this. But I would say it's probably safe to say that most Republican members are not supporters.
I'd like to drill down on that answer a little bit. Is the audience really the people who aren't the co-sponsors? Because co-sponsoring it sort of means we support the bill, and if it ever gets to the floor, we'll vote for it.
That's correct.
It ain't gonna get to the floor.
Then,
And you've already forgotten more about
but
co-sponsoring.
at the point we're at right now, increasing the numbers of people willing to vote for it is where we need to be, because we already have 105 people who have been willing to put their name on it, and their district knows that. Right, so if it comes up for a vote, yes, they've already stated support for it. What we need to do is make it inevitable to come up for a vote. Which means we need to get other people in the House to say, you know what, this is a pretty good idea. I'm hearing about this from all, we need to create buzz in the House that we need to do this.
But
That's what we need.
isn't it also a question of getting the KCONs of the world to not only support it, but when they have their annual talk with the speaker, say, this is my bill, I gotta have
Yeah, we
this
need
one."
it prioritized, absolutely, absolutely. But we also need to soften the ground for all of these seeds to grow. And right now, that's not the case. So we need to make it a warm, fuzzy place. It's time. Look at
I
that.
love the energy, I love the issue in this bill, this is great, I hate to cut this off, but it is
No,
starting.
that's fine.
It is coming
It's
up on
past our
9 o'clock.
bedtime.
So let me just quickly say, and Phil, although I am retiring as executive director, I'm still working on this. And if, instead of moral responsibility, anybody thinks they have a moral imperative to protect God's creation, see Fran Ludwig, if you're an officer or clergy of a church, to sign the interfaith call for carbon pricing. If you want to volunteer, see either Fran or me, and we'll plug you into this.
And can I just say one quick thing in closing? So, I am a mother of 3 kids, and I have been an environmentalist long before they were born. I do believe that this is the future of family values, is protecting the environment so our children will have a future. And I think we need to be communicating that. to everyone, including our more conservative friends and neighbors who don't see their own personal responsibility in this. So, you know, Teddy Roosevelt and the Republican Party of yesteryear believed in personal responsibility, and they also believed in being good stewards. I think we need to rekindle that in the future Republican Party. So.